Now we're in our last module for Chapter 10, Module 8, where we're going to highlight adolescent work and some of the implications of adolescents working during high school, and then adult achievement, a little bit into that. So what we're going to look at when we talk about adolescent work, there is a lot of debate. Is work a good thing for adolescents to do while they're in high school? And the answer, of course, is it depends. So what we know is that if you work 10 hours or less a week, there usually is associated with some pretty good outcomes in regards to adolescents working. It gives you appreciation of what it takes to work and earn your own money, responsibilities, and things like that. But when we see it tipping into 20 plus hours a week, we begin to see it having a detrimental kind of effect. So what are the things that work provide us? Well, you gain knowledge about the world of work, which is what you're going to be doing for much of your adult life, or at least we hope so. You understand things about consumer issues, whether that's interacting with the public and having to deal with people and clients that are not particularly happy. You have financial management issues, such as being able to save money, build for goals, things like that. And sometimes you can have greater self-reliance because you know that you're able to work effectively. So if you had some concerns or lower self-esteem, it might help build that because you know that you have a level of competence. But what working can do, especially when you work a lot in that 20 plus hours a week, it can lead to an alienation from school and a greater distancing from parents and contributes to problems that maybe hadn't been as apparent before. So some of the overall impacts you can see is a lower GPA. Not surprising, you're not spending as much probably time on your homework. You may skip some of the assignments that are due because you've been working. You may find yourself more disengaged and bored because the world of work can be exciting in a different way than school. And you're not mandated, or if you are mandated to do something, at least you're getting paid to do it. So you can see that. You can also see some alienation or anxiety. And so they're not having the same kind of experiences as maybe some of your classmates. You're working around people who may be older than you, which is a different kind of setting than in school. You may see that you can't juggle the 20 plus hours a week and the 40 some odd hours that you're putting in at school. And so there can be some anxiety about maybe not living up to that, or you may be able to identify more with your work life than your school. Lower in math, school and math, or math and science achievement. So not surprisingly, math and science requires a lot of time usually to be put in. And if you just simply don't have that time, then you're going to go ahead and see a lowering of your overall performance in school. And then you also have a higher likelihood of alcohol and drug use. And that's because you're around older people, people who can get things like drugs and alcohol legally or illegally. And, after work, especially if you've ever worked that very late shift, you kind of have that adrenaline pumping from having worked. You can't just go home. And some people are having get-togethers. And so there's much higher likelihood of getting exposed to that alcohol and drugs in that type of setting. You may also feel the disengagement and know that other people are, say, have been using or party at work, and it doesn't seem to impact anything. So why does it really matter? And so you decide to go do that. So a lot of downsides if you're working more than 20 hours a week. Now, all that being said, if your family needs money and you got to support yourself, either, to pay for school or to save up for school or other needs that are more pertinent, you do what you have to do. What I'm talking about here is more the ideal environment. And there's also something to be said for the types of jobs that adolescents are able to get, a lot of times more fast food or service, but at the low end, and it's usually not related to what you've been learning in school so much. If you happen to luck out and get a job that has higher kind of expectations and requirements for you, stuff that you have learned in school, they've actually found that even if you're working more than 20 hours a week, it's actually a good thing for school. probably because you're seeing the relevance of what you're learning because you're actually having to do it. Whereas at these lower level jobs, you don't maybe see the relevance. The connection's not as strong because the levels of skills that are expected of you at these low end jobs don't line up well with, say, a high school curriculum. So that's my little spiel about work and school. Of course, in my adolescence class, we go into a lot more detail into some of these work-related issues. So now let's move on into adulthood. And what we see is that achievement motivation is pretty stable through the lifespan. So the level of achievement motivation carries into adulthood, and it influences a lot of the decisions and life outcomes that we make. But it is not solely driven by more education, which it typically is when we're younger, but you also have work achievement and you also have family achievement. So it just depends on how your life kind of turns out. If you end up having a family and you decide to stay home with that family to help raise children, that's going to be a different type of achievement. And I think you've seen many parents who have decided to stay home with their children, really driving those children to succeed by taking them on travel teams and taking them to all the advanced extracurricular things and really supporting them. That would be a different way of showing achievement motivation than, say, getting your doctorate like I did, or going and trying to climb the corporate ladder. Start off at a low level, try to become a manager, and then you move your way on up there. So adult achievement's going to look a bit different than we would see with adolescents and children because the focus is a bit broader in the ways that you can focus on that achievement. So overall, we also want to look at continuing education a little bit with adults. Almost a third of all college students are 25 years and older. Returning students, a lot of times, will put forth greater effort to really understand the material. It's like they've come back around to that intrinsic motivation because they really want to learn, and they've been out in the world long enough to understand why they would want those sort of skills. And sometimes that can be really helpful. It just depends on the individual. Some people are probably best off just going straight on through and never knowing any different, even though they may be a little more extrinsically motivated. They'll get through much more education than they would typically. Others who maybe see that disconnect, don't really see why I'm going to this sort of thing and putting in all this time. It's maybe better to get out into the real world and having to work and do other things, and then coming back with that kind of greater appreciation because now you've run into all these situations of things and opportunities that maybe you can't do because you don't have the level of education required. So, I guess it's the never too late to start. And of course, in the modality we're talking in here through video and online learning is much more amenable for somebody that has a job currently or has to work during the days. This is a lot more flexible kind of modality. So that's going to wrap up Chapter 10. That we talked about all the language and language development in the first few modules, and then we've shifted to education. So that's Chapter 10, and tune in for Chapter 11 next week.